So I'm really pleased to be here today with John Cloys from Princeton University to talk about this project that we launched last year. And so before we get started into the project, let's introduce ourselves. John, do you want to go first?
Sure, thanks, Suzanne. As she said, my name is John Cloys. I'm the Web Services Manager at Princeton University for the School of Public and International Affairs.
And I'm Suzanne Dergacheva. I'm the co-founder of Evolving Web, a Drupal agency based in Montreal. And I'm also really involved in the Drupal community. And so you can always feel free to talk to me about stuff like Promote Drupal or other ways to get involved.
Suzanne, I'm seeing the speaker notes are on the screen. They're covering up your slide. Yeah. Great.
Oh, we don't use those then. That's fine.
There you are.
Thank you.
Of course.
We're so happy to have the room monitors here to keep us on track. So before we dig into like what we built with Drupal, we'll take a step back and talk a bit about why we did this project, why we underwent this migration to Drupal. When Princeton first approached Evolving Web and decided to do this project, they had this vision for a new website that was more user-friendly, more modern. And I think every project that I have undertaken in the last 2 or 3 years, top of the list of things to improve, goals to achieve, it's always, we want to make it easier for users to find content. And that was definitely the case with this project. John, do you want to talk a little bit more about the reasons?
Yeah, certainly. And so jumping off of that, I think content was a big driver for us. We had some great content in the old website, but, it was very buried. So prospective students and our world-renowned faculty and researchers and their research studies, really, it was quite hard to find. So that was a sort of a primary goal for us heading into this project.
And another thing just to point out, so Princeton University of course has a reputation and is very well known, but the School of Public and International Affairs itself, it has its own unique objectives and goals as a public policy school. They have a lot of research that's done at the school. They attract a really diverse set of students and faculty. And so really putting that forward and showcasing that research was another main objective, and really kind of capturing what the school does. So looking back to the Drupal 7 site, now it looks so unfamiliar. It's been a little while since the new site was launched. But basically there was a lot of really fantastic content, like so many Drupal 7 websites out there. I mean, it served a great purpose in being able to showcase a lot of content. But that being said, there was just kind of a lot going on. It was a little bit overwhelming. And especially for any kind of potential student not familiar with the school, it was a little bit hard to orient and figure out where to go first.
Definitely. Thank you, Suzanne. As you mentioned, it was really hard to find content on the old site, and for lack of a better phrase, it was sort of a electronic brochure, if you will, for the school. So we really wanted to make something that was a little bit more dynamic, and again attract those prospective students and appeal to the general public.
And what I really liked about the ask that the school had when they came forward looking for vendors to work with, like looking for who can help us do this migration, they also outlined the needs of their own team. So they put forward a list of like, here's the objectives for the students, but also we want this website to be easier for us to update. And here's the things that we want to have, the tools that we want to have. And I love seeing that because, we're always looking to build better tools for content editors as well. So when we first started the project, we kind of put the team together, and it was really a group effort. On the Evolving Web side, we had Ken, who's our project manager, leading the whole team. And then myself and my colleague Annika, we were working on the UX side of things early on in the project to define it. And then Franz led the architecture and the migration work. We had a really, it was a treat to have Farhat working on this project because he does design and front-end development. So he built out a lot of the visual interface as well as actually doing the Drupal theme. And Mohammed on our team did a lot of the back-end development work and more custom features.
And then from the Princeton side was myself and Julia Chung were the main contacts. And within that, we worked in a communications office. So we had access to content editors and the like there. I will say that it's very helpful having sort of this dedicated team, because throughout the process, with the faculty committees and the like, it helped to have a single point of contact to go to and ask their opinions, and in some cases be able to use that to persuade them one way or the other.
Yeah, so in some of our workshops, we got to meet the content team and other stakeholders at Princeton, but of course there's a lot of decisions to make. So it's great to have a team that can work really closely together. And at the beginning of the project, we actually got to all meet in person way back like over a year ago, whenever that was. And as much as we now like doing virtual workshops and things, I think it always really helps to be there on site. And just coming to Princeton campus, we got a chance to see the students and meet some of the faculty, and it really helps us to build an impression of like, what are we designing for? So I'll just launch into talking a bit about how we started collaborating in figuring out the new user experience for the website, because obviously this was one of the main drivers. And whenever we do this type of work, we always try and start by having at least a little bit of time to step back and look at the priorities of the organization, not just the website itself and the features that it needs, but really like, how does this website fit into the bigger picture and the goals that you're trying to achieve? So for the school, at Princeton, there's this slogan in the service of humanity. There's these ideas that are being generated to really improve the world. And so when we ask why, that's kind of the first thing that all the stakeholders said, was that our graduates go out there and change the world, and we are there to support that. But getting more specific, the school itself generates a lot of research, and this research is really cross-domain. There's researchers in many different disciplines, and they're all coming together to showcase kind of how that work can support public policy. And so that's really the main goal and why the school exists. And then stepping back into the how does the school achieve this? Well, of course, they have their curriculum and their particular programs that they offer. It's the whole environment, and then it's the faculty and the people who are there who are able to teach. And then the specifics of the school, like generating research, interacting with students, having this engaging environment that they're able to create. This is all part of the package. And I think another important thing that's behind all this, when you look at why an organization exists, how they do what they do, especially when you look at higher education projects, the people are also part of that brand and part of that community. So showcasing individuals and their contribution is always a really important goal, even if it's not stated. It's like, these are the individuals who actually make up the school that someone might apply to. So that's kind of figuring out the more high level goals, but then actually digging into like, what does this website need to achieve? Of course, there's many people who are part of a university environment. You have alumni, you have faculty, you have staff, you have students. And usually once students kind of get on the ground and are part of the community, they have lots of ways to figure out what's going on. And so generally a website like this, we would think that the primary persona that we're targeting are potential students. And in this case, that's true. We definitely wanted to make all the programs and curriculum and what the school offers. We wanted to make all that really clear to prospective students. But when we sat down and did these workshops together, we also uncovered the fact that policymakers are an important audience as well. And showcasing the research of the school to policymakers is something that makes the school stand out because they're producing this research that that's really important for the world. So the workshops actually uncovered this. We had assumed that potential students were the most important audience, and it turned out that policymakers were just as important. And so that had a big influence on the information architecture work that we did. When we did our workshop together, we actually did the whiteboarding kind of exercise in person. We gathered all the existing content as well as new content that we had come up with as potentially important, potentially useful content for this new website. And we did an exercise a couple times where we mapped out this content and tried to figure out how it would be most useful to organize it to help users on their journey. So whether it's a potential student trying to research the school and eventually apply, or whether it's a policymaker looking for an expert in the field or looking for research that's been produced. We walked through those journeys and we mapped out on the board kind of what we thought the best architecture would be. And we did that with stakeholders in the room. And we also did it with students so we could kind of get their perspective as well and see what came out of their ideas. And it was really useful because in these sessions, you actually hear stories of, how does a student kind of approach this school for the first time when they're doing an application, or what's going through the mind of a policymaker who is looking to the school for leadership. So we did these exercises together, and then the team at Evolving Web, we kind of went back to the office and rebuilt the information architecture, kind of cleaned it up, and got it into a form that was a bit more consolidated. We kind of made some decisions about how we thought things should be organized based on our understanding of the personas. And then we worked together to validate that. And one of the ways we validated it is we did a bit of usability testing. And for this, we used a very simple type of test called a tree test, where you take your information architecture, you take that sitemap, and you put it into a tool. We used Optimal Workshop, but there's other tools that you can use for this as well. And then we just ran it through some simple testing. So we got some potential students to actually, potential applicants to go and actually test this. So we asked them, for example, where would you go on the website to find scholarship information? And then we would see if they were successful in finding the right page. And I think the information architecture we created, it's a nice balance. It's not super flat. Some websites, they really try and flatten everything into just one set of simple menu items. And I think we ended up going with this simplified mega menu. It does have enough room for us to showcase like sub items in a menu and to have a call to action there. Just kind of like the main information that the school is trying to push at any given time. But we were pretty pleased with the with the information architecture we ended up with. And then moving on to the wireframes, this is kind of where we started to figure out on each page, what's the most important information, what are the most important calls to action, what are the key kind of next steps that a user is going to take. And for each page, we also tried to consider who's the most important audience for this page. So is it an applicant? Is it a policymaker? Is it a current student? You know, what's that main audience and what do they want to do next? And the wireframes we created were relatively detailed so that we would have a really clear picture of what are the most important things for each page. And I think here we're kind of blurring the lines between what is user experience work and what is content strategy work. So at this point, the team at Princeton was also able to kind of see, okay, what's the content that we need to create for each page and what format does that need to go into? And then it becomes a collaboration between our teams. John, do you have anything to add?
No, that's great, Suzanne. You know, like you said, how the personas sort of influence the information architecture, and then here are the wireframes, and really the content gaps that we were able to identify early on and sort of head off at the pass, and how that sort of influences the next phase, which is sort of the design. And really, with the visual design in this project, we try to really take a step back and utilize more of those content components. And of course, we're Princeton, so one person in our group said you can use any color as long as it's orange. You know, how do we do that in the most flexible way, but also in a way that's thoughtful in terms of accessibility and moving forward, especially in this sort of virtual environment as well. Again, too, you know, really a goal here was sort of surfacing the content that was already there in a more visual way. So you can see here on this screen to the right there is sort of events, which is a big piece of what we do. And we have 20 centers and programs that feed up to the school that do events as well. Again, another feature was that sort of admissions timeline that you'll see there in the left corner. We found through that tree jack testing and things like that that the information was there, but it was buried. You know, just having that sort of one-stop shop. And lastly, social media is a big part of what we do. So we were able to integrate with Juicer, and you can see that in that sort of join the conversation box, the top middle there.
Yeah, so the way that we approached the design, we had already planned out the fact that we would be building the new site with content components. So we would have some fixed content types like the research items and the events and news and things like that. But a lot of the pages that you're seeing here in these designs are actually flexible pages that we ended up building with paragraphs. And so we wanted to make sure that each component on the page was well designed and kind of self-contained and then could be combined with other components. So that's really the approach we took when we did the design. We didn't design like page by page. We tried to do it more like building a set of components that could be reused. And we found it really useful too to onboard the content team to kind of show them this model of content components so that they would know how much flexibility they would have after the site was launched. So they didn't, you know, have to make all the decisions about the content and how it would be organized right off the bat.
I should note too that this has been very, very helpful for what, 6 or 8 months post-launch. So now if I have a conversation with a faculty member or a staff member about a certain section on the page, literally sometimes in those meetings, I can just kind of shift those Lego pieces and give them some sort of a prototype within minutes as opposed to days. So it's been very helpful in that regard as well.
Yeah, so all of our visual designs, like I said, we used a component-based approach. Our very first step was to create a style guide where we got that sign off on the orange and the complementary colors. So you see there's orange, but there's also quite a bit of blue. And we developed this approach to the typography to keep the design relatively simple, so it could be content focused, given that there is quite a bit of content on the website. And then we also developed designs for specific elements like the timeline, which I think is really useful in helping students orient themselves and reassuring them. So the style guide was, complete, but not super extensive. So it was just kind of enough information that we would know how to style the main elements. And then additional things like the search interface, we just built on top of this, following the same kind of interface style. In terms of the content, we did do a content migration. This is a Drupal 7 to Drupal 8 migration. So even before we started the design work, we were able to identify what content just needed to be migrated as is from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8. And so that migration work started early. That really helps, because then when you're doing the development, you have real content to style. And then all the pages that were more like key landing pages, these were rebuilt manually in Drupal 8, given that they were completely changing in terms of the content. So we didn't bother migrating that over.
And Suzanne, I should note that looking back too, that was really key to the success of this project, because we were able to sort of have those conversations from the start. And eliminate some of that extra content that was no longer needed, which in turn really gave us focus to move forward and spend attention on those higher level pages. So I would really encourage other people to do the same. Specifically, with universities, a lot of times I find that people like to use the website for historical purposes, and so this was just really helpful, just to sort of cut from the beginning and move on from there.
Yeah, and it can be difficult. I know with some higher ed institutions, like if content decisions are really political, it's like who gets a place on the homepage, or like the website is seen as this reflection of the organization. But it's really great at the beginning of the project if you can just instill this mindset of, what do our users need? How can we put our users first? What content do they need on the page? And I find that really helps, always orienting towards your users. It helps make decisions, and it makes all the decisions less political and more just straightforward. What's going to be easiest to use? There was a big focus, of course, in this project, I think, over the last year. But from day one with this project, having a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, that was something we really wanted to showcase on the website. And one way that I think the website really does that, other than just call outs like this that says like, this is what we're committed to, it also includes a lot of community spotlights and a lot of focus on individuals in the SBIA community, so students, but also alumni, faculty. And I think it's really nice to just have this focus on the individual stories of the people who make up the community. And so providing those kind of community spotlights as a content component is a really great way to do that. One of the other things in terms of the design and development of the site is making the content more accessible through search. So aside from just having a nice sitemap so that users can find information easily, we wanted to create this, this search that would really encompass all the content. And the search includes all that research content I was talking about. There's also a directory, there's an event search. And so the design of that was something we also focused on.
And again, with the search, Suzanne, if you go back to the previous slide, these are some of those topics that we decided on early on that were sort of strategic priorities for the school, but also for the university. So giving the user a quick way to get there. And with this particular implementation, we decided to use Solr and implement things like autocomplete, facets and filters, etc., just to help the user really drill down and ultimately find what they came to look for.
So in terms of the actual features we built, I think we've already touched on a number of things, but we'll just point out some of the special features of this particular site. So John mentioned briefly before Juicer. It's this tool for embedding social content directly into the site, but not just kind of the standard feed ticker tracker of Twitter updates. It's more of a curated list of content. And so it can combine also content from different platforms. I find this a really nice display. So you can have some visual content there too. And I find it really makes the website seem active and fresh, and like, here's what's going on right now. Here's the current commentary. If you're putting all that energy into your social platforms, it's nice for the website to be able to reflect that. And we appreciate Juicer because it actually looks nice, like it's styled like the website, doesn't look out of place. In terms of search, so there's the actual search section of the website, but there's also some embedded places where you can search for content. The events interface, of course, now it's all these virtual events, but this events platform can accommodate all kinds of different content. And instead of the calendar display, which didn't really work too well with the rhythm of events at the school, we just integrated like a grid where you can see all the upcoming events. And it really focuses on what's coming up soon, so you can see immediately. Oh, go ahead.
No, and I was going to add quickly, Suzanne, that with regards to the events calendar, we have a university calendar that we use called Timeline. It's a sort of a homegrown system, but it was really easy to link to that calendar using a JSON feed right out of the box. So that was very nice. Whereas before we had to do a little bit of custom work for that. So
yeah, that's always something I find with universities. There's always this kind of a global set of news, a global set of events, and it's if everybody's using Drupal, it's always really easy to pass that data back and forth, especially now with JSON being so flexible with Drupal. One of the things I'll just mention more specifically about this sitemap, because I know I mentioned a few times, oh, we made this great new sitemap. But one of the improvements I think that we made that was relevant for other schools are the pathways around admissions. So when students are first kind of exploring their different options of schools to apply to, they go through this mode where they're doing research, they're looking into all the programs available, and then at some point they make that decision to go and apply. So we found that when we were doing this user research and doing the user journey mapping at the beginning of the process, that there were these two modes that applicants would go through. So we found it made sense to have a section more about the programs available and a separate section for admissions that would explain the process. So the program section really outlines the tangible experience of the programs, what they involve, kind of that academic side, and admissions is more about the actual process you have to go through, the specific requirements at each step. And so by breaking that up into two sections, we were really thinking about those as being two separate experiences you would go through. But of course, that's there's always, more than one way to do things. And I think there's also something to be said for combining the experiences. We found that in this case, it worked better to have the two sections. But that's part of why we did that tree testing. We made the call early-ish, maybe midway through the project, to use paragraphs to manage the content components. And we did this because the content components on this website are quite simple. So there's not a lot of layout options. We did think about using Layout Builder, and we were tempted. I know John and I were both kind of excited to use the latest and greatest tools available in Drupal. But in this case, because we wanted to keep things more streamlined, we decided that paragraphs was the best option, and really does give enough flexibility for creating these different kinds of components and being able to structure the pages as required by the content editors. We talked a little bit about the search experience. So this just shows a little bit more that general search page where you can look for research and other kinds of content, and gives you a little bit of filtering, but not so many filters that it's overwhelming. And I think overall, when we think back on the keys to success for this project and why it was successful, from our perspective, there were a few things that I think the team at Princeton really did right from the start, like prioritizing the user experience was really great. So they came to us with a set of priorities, but it was really oriented around user needs. And not like a really detailed list of functionality. So we were able to adapt the functionality to the user needs rather than the other way around. There was also a real focus on accessibility, even from the faculty. So when we did the stakeholder workshops, we heard from faculty members, questions about, oh, well, is this color accessible? Or if we add a video this way, is it going to be accessible? And it was great to hear them voicing those as priorities. I thought that was amazing to see. I think using the component-based design worked really well in this case. It really helped us get everybody on board in terms of where the direction of the pages needed to go. And then in terms of our technical choices, we really tried to use Drupal core as much as possible. So not using a ton of contributed modules or a lot of custom code. We really tried to focus on something that would be really sustainable and that the school could maintain independently. And we already mentioned starting the migration early. And that kind of helped because with the academic kind of calendar, we had to wait to do stakeholder workshops until everyone was back and available in September or October at school. So we were able to start the project a little bit sooner with the migration work in advance.
Yeah, and I just want to note here too, because of these decisions made sort of early on, literally yesterday we upgraded to Drupal 9, and that was sort of a click of a button. It was no headache whatsoever, knock on wood. But it was quite smooth, and it's because we really, like Suzanne said, we kept close to core as much as we could, and really defaulted to sort of that less is more mentality.
I know people like to ask about tools because we mentioned a bunch about our UX process. So in this project, we were able to use real sticky notes and whiteboards. In our projects now, we actually use something called Miro as a virtual version of whiteboarding and kind of brainstorming at the beginning. We used FlowMap for creating the sitemap. And I really like FlowMap because it has the ability to add annotations, and you can even use it to map out personas. So it has a lot of great features. Our design team uses Sketch. although we also really love Figma. They're both good for collaborating on design. And then InVision is how we present the designs and gather feedback. So the commenting tools in InVision are quite good. That tree testing thing I showed where you can test the sitemap, for that we used Optimal Workshop. The type of testing there is called TreeJack, but there's other software you can use for that too. We do use Slack for some day-to-day communication, but mostly Basecamp for things like just tracking deliverables and stuff like that. So, oh, this was a fun thing. Oh, I hope this works. Oh yeah, good. Phew. So just before, what was it, John, like a week before launch?
And yeah, it was literally a week before launch. We were told that this school's name would be changing from the Woodrow Wilson School to now the Princeton School of Public and International Affairs. So that was really fun. However, again, because of the decisions we made early on, it was very flexible and wasn't too much of a heavy lift, and we could physically do that in a week. So that was a quick win early on, and it really spoke to the new site and its ability to be very, very flexible.
Yeah, and so just a reminder, if you think, oh, the name of our website could never change, it's not necessarily true. You know, things change fast sometimes in this day and age. So I think the results overall really positive. We were able to launch on time, showcase a lot of this great content and leadership from this school, and also keep the messaging of the school really clear and clean on the website. And so, and in the end, I think, you know, students can come and apply. We're looking forward to future improvements to the admissions section, and, you know, as an opportunity this year, because admissions, there's no in-person events, it's all online. There's kind of an opportunity to make even more improvements and use the website even more as a tool around communications and just recruitment and that kind of thing. So I think there's always room for going in and iterating on these kinds of tools.
And I should note, Suzanne, that you know, we just recently looked at some of our analytics because it has been several months, and we just crossed that million page views, which for us was about an increase of at least 4 or 5 times of what we used to see on our previous site. Again, you know, I think the flexible design and sort of the way it surfaces some of those top level content really speaks to that.
That's exciting. A million, that's a great number. All right, so let's look. I think I saw some questions popping up. So I'm just gonna open the chat. And
I think there was
if you
a
have
question
questions,
specifically about the theme, Suzanne, and somebody noticed that it was sort of the glider base.
oh yeah, so the glider is the name of our kind of base theme that we use at Evolving Web, and so it's true. WWS is stuck there in the name of the theme. So if you look really hard, you can see that. I think it's pretty hidden.
Hey, I'm Rick Metz with the lead with the city of Tampa. And what I notice is you have like a website, but there are other schools that have a similar website, you know, like your law school maybe, or your med school and the regular school. How do you kind of tie all those together? Or, you know, is there an effort to kind of tie them together, or just, you know, go on as separate entities? Because we run into that issue, like our convention center wants to be separate and all that stuff.
Rick, that's a great question. At Princeton, again, as part of the approval process, we have to align with the Central Office of Communications and really try to take some of those design elements or some of those design decisions that they require, again, can be around accessibility, etc., and really sort of bake those into our sites. Now, at our school, we do support our 20 centers and programs, and we're able to use some of these elements on their sites as well. So again, so there's some continuity, but at the same time, it can be sort of unique depending on the flavors.
Yeah, we kind of studied this, and I only found like one or two sites, like City of Austin, I think, had like a thin black banner across the top of all those sites, which would allow you to jump to any of the sites. I'm not saying it's appropriate for you, and we didn't incorporate it ourselves either, but you know, I'm just, you know, and then we always kind of worry about the search thing too. If people split off more and more content into a separate site, then, you know, is it really searchable from our site? We haven't figured out a solution to that, you know, in the most part.
Yeah, some schools and organizations, like governmental organizations, take more of an approach of confederated search, where you can set up a search that will truly search across domains, and that's possible with Apache Solar and using like Search API and Drupal. So that's something that you can consider. It's definitely feasible to have more than one search source, not just the local search. And in terms of the user experience, that's something that you'll commonly see is, like you mentioned, that banner across the top. And it might give the opportunity to search within the site or to search globally, which I think is something users are pretty familiar with seeing.
Okay, well, thanks. Site looks great. We did a similar upgrade from Drupal 7 to Drupal 8, went live with that in December 2020. So yeah, the paragraphs, wonderful.
Great, thanks, Rick. Any other questions? No? Okay, yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for those who commented, Karen, Benji, Digby, everyone for attending. It was great to see you all out here. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your Drupal Camp, Florida.